Welcome to Espiritu Coffee Chats, where we brew up inspiring conversations over a warm cup of coffee. I'm Valerie, the co-owner of Surge Coffee Co., where we highlight culture and community in all of our drinks.
And I'm Arlene, the owner of Lunaso Wellness. As a holistic realtor, interior designer, and spiritual coach, I'm excited to bring a unique perspective to our chat.
Together, we'll explore the world of herbalism, spirituality, and the entrepreneurial journey.
We will also dive into our Latina backgrounds and how we navigate the everyday world.
So grab your favorite mug and settle in, and let's dive into today's chat. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to our shit show. I'm just kidding.
So this is our first podcast together.
Yes.
I feel like we've both done podcast episodes separately.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is our show. I'm so excited.
Me too. Finally.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to be talking about all things that we are doing.
Yes, all of the things.
So entrepreneurship, spirituality, some astrology and tarot in there also, human design probably.
Yes.
For sure, entrepreneurship in every form.
Being Latina, being a woman of color, being first gen, second gen, all the gens.
Living in America.
Living in America. Boy. It's going to be some rough times the next couple months.
I try not to think about it.
Yeah. We'll not talk about that right now. That'll be a future episode.
Yeah, one day when we're feeling, maybe after November.
Oh, no, there's some good astrology that's actually very enlightening when it comes to politics. So I think that's something we could probably talk about.
Okay. Yes, that would make me feel so much better. I feel like because I tend to get really in my head, especially about politics. Yeah, I just would like to have some hope.
Yeah, my aunt is a politician, so I have like a childhood memories of her campaigning and doing all these things, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, hopefully it gets better. I mean, California's nice, so
I know you can't take the sunshine away from us. It's free.
Yeah, we pay for it in taxes, but it is free.
That's true. I take that back. Never mind.
Our sunshine tax.
Yeah. Oh, we'll also be talking about real estate every here and there.
Yes.
Home wellness, all the witchy bruja things, herbs, plant medicine. So yeah, all the things, just all in a witch's pot.
Maybe we'll talk about our ayahuasca experiences a little bit.
Oh yes, people have been very intrigued about ayahuasca and the experiences. We both get a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. I told my therapist about it. I don't know if I told you that, but I told my therapist. She was taking notes.
Oh, wow. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I really don't know. I hope it's a good thing. But she was taking notes because some of her other clients are also interested in ayahuasca and psychedelics in general. So just sharing my experience and what that is like.
Yeah.
What it's like for me.
It's definitely interesting. I've been running an ayahuasca retreat. We called my first retreat after it ended. We called it Ayahuasca Season 1 Survivors.
Yes. There was 5 of us, 6 of us?
7.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm totally off. Yeah, that was a good time. Really nice.
Yeah. Good times.
After everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for today, I think our topic is going to be reclaiming our culture and heritage as, I guess, first generation or 1.5 generation and second generation.
Yeah. Well, it's complicated because I don't feel that way.
Yeah, me neither.
I still feel like, I don't know, I can still feel the first generation vibes. So my grandpas were born in the United States, but then they were raised in Mexico. So, and then my grandmas, they were both born in their country. So one grandma was born in Nicaragua, the other one was born in Mexico. So that's what makes me second to third generation.
Yeah, technically second generation, which is kind of funny because I feel like first generation should be like the first ones that actually lived here and grew up here, despite like whether our parents were born here or not. Like, because I feel like in that sense, it really does affect how you grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom was almost born in Mexico because there's 8 of her siblings, and she's the middle one. And the only reason why she was born in the United States was because my grandpa was already here working. And then my grandma needed surgery for her appendix while she was pregnant. Oh. So then my grandpa flew her to the United States to have her have the surgery. So like she wouldn't die or whatever. But other than that, my mom probably would have been born in Mexico.
Wow. That's kind of a crazy, cool story.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. So, you know, she got her citizenship.
I mean, hey, you got to do it one way or another. Land of the free, right?
Yeah. She was like, Mom, can we go over there? But, yeah. And then my dad's, his, I guess he's first and second, because kind of like my mom, both the same.
Yeah, my parents were both born in Mexico, and they lived there for, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, I think they said. Like, my dad was still pretty young when he came over, and actually I never asked them the story of how they came over. But they, on my dad's side, it's a pretty big family. I think they're like 8 or 9, in total. And yeah, they came over from Mexico City. My grandma is Venezolana though. So I actually don't even know how my grandma and my grandpa met. I should probably ask them.
Yeah.
While they're still here. Get that story. That'd be really nice.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I wish I was able to talk to my grandparents more, because my family didn't teach me Spanish because they got made fun of when they were younger. The fun fact about me and Valerie is that our families are both from this, or were raised in the same little area at some point in La Puente, California.
Isn't that crazy? We're like both from... Some people now call it Bridgetown, apparently. If you're cool, you call it Bridgetown. I had no idea.
Yeah, because Puente.
Yeah. But yeah, I had, like, it's crazy to think that, like, we had our families in, like, the same area had so much of the similar experiences, and then somehow we are both in San Diego and got connected at an entrepreneurship, like, meetup of all things.
Yeah. It was like our spirit guides were like, hey, let's just get them back together again.
Antennas are going.
Yeah, they were definitely like making, I don't know, what is that called? Like they were planning our date to happen.
Yeah, I really feel like that.
Yeah, because like, I don't know, something about La Puente, like people who come from there, there's just something about like, I don't know, you don't even have to say it. You're just like, oh yeah, and then there's this and there's that and there's this. It's such a, because it's 30 minutes outside of Los Angeles.
Yes. Yeah. So I remember growing up, everyone would be like, oh, where'd you grow up? I'd be like, oh, LA, because it's like the broader part. And then I would ask, and of course, no one knows where La Puente is. Mm-mm. And there was a couple people. And I remember one time, actually, I think I was like after college and I had just started my corporate career. And there was this older gentleman. He was like, oh, where are you from? And I told him, and he actually knew where La Puente was. And he was like, oh, you're not from LA. You're from the barrio. I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so.
SGV, San Gabriel Valley. Yeah, so that was like interesting because it was like 2 seconds. You're like maybe 2 or 3 cities from being in the Inland Empire.
Yes, which is where I grew up afterwards.
Which is where I also grew up. So also another connection that we have.
I know. So. I feel like we like missed each other. We were like in La Puente and we missed each other, and then we were like somehow supposed to meet in the Inland Empire, and it never happened.
And then we're like, it's hot. And we decided to move to San Diego separately.
Yeah.
So,
and then our paths connected. I feel like that's so cool.
Yeah.
So your parents didn't teach you Spanish because they got made fun of?
Yeah, so they both, well, they were both raised in La Puente. My dad was born and raised in La Puente, and then my mom too. So I think my mom went there at moved there at the age of like 4 because her house burned down. And she lived in Gardena at the time. Ooh. So that's what brought them to La Puente. They bought a house. And then my grandma and grandpa already lived there, my dad's parents. And so the funny thing is that they lived around the corner from each other. My mom and dad, like their childhood house. So they met in high school. But they told me that both families decided not to teach their children Spanish because they were getting made fun of. So what they told me that when they first moved to La Puente, it was a predominantly white neighborhood. And then it wasn't until like maybe the late 60s where they started to get influx in from LA, and then the culture started to change for the most part. Now you go there, it's pretty much mostly Latino.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, when I was growing up, for sure it was mostly Latino.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I remember. And I was born in like the 80s. So, but I guess back then, and then, you know, being first, I could think, or it makes sense when I think about the mindset of my grandparents. You know, they're coming in, they were immigrants, or maybe they were born here, but then they still don't feel like they're American, even though my grandpas were born here. So they already probably felt that racism coming in. And so they were already getting like, you know, maybe made fun of or ridiculed or whatever. So then, another thing is my grandma and my grandpa, my dad's side, they met in, ESL.
Oh.
So they met in like learning how to speak English. So clearly it was important for them to speak English. So I think they just were like, let's really Americanize our kids. And so that way they don't have to go through what we went through. And then the same decision was made for my mom's side as well. So then my mom and dad do understand Spanish. So they both know it fluently. But then when it came down to us, there was still, I guess, some of that energy of like, oh, if you speak Spanish, you're like a wetback, basically, or you're just, you know, not American enough or whatever. So then it just kind of carried on into the next generation. So none of my cousins speak Spanish on both sides of the family, my mom's side and my dad's side.
Yeah, Spanish was actually my first language. And I didn't know English very well.
Oh, cute.
And it's so funny because I feel like sometimes I get like my brain gets stuck and there's certain things that I'll say in American, English words that I'll say, and I will read it in Spanish, like just unknowingly. But I don't speak it as much anymore. I don't speak it as strongly either because a little bit of the same story, but slightly different. Like my parents were also entrepreneurs and had their own businesses growing up, from what I remember. And it was very important for us to be speaking English. And I just remember my mom didn't want us to be in ESL because there was still kind of that like divide and segregation a little bit. And you just were treated differently. That was just what it was back in the 90s.
Right.
And yeah, I think from there, and then our household became an English first household. So it was just something, we didn't practice Spanish. Like I would maybe speak it with my grandma, with my grandmas and my grandpa. But I feel so out of practice now and even when I do speak it, I've had so many instances. I have friends, they call me and they'll literally tell me, they're like, oh, you're such a pocha. And I'm just like, dude, I'm trying. Like,
yeah,
I'm trying to speak my native tongue, which was my first language. And I don't know, it feels like this, I feel like between the language and like getting made fun of, there's kind of this feeling of like, oh shit, am I actually Mexican? Like, am I Latina? Like, can I be considered this? But it's pretty much all I've known my entire life.
Right. I feel like when I watched the Selena movie and she's like talking to her dad in I think it's the truck, and she's like kind of saying like, you know, I got to be this over here, but then I'm not enough over there. Da, da, da. And that was the first time in my life where I ever got recognized for feeling that same way. And it was just like, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Because for me, you know, you look at me and I look Latina, so people automatically assume I would speak Spanish. And then when I do know a few of the Spanish words, I say them pretty well. Like taquito, tortilla, tamales, you know. And I know all the bad words in Spanish. So I just know what I know from hearing it from my grandma and my grandpa talking, or just hearing family members talk and going to family parties, and also going to my friends' houses. So a lot of my friends where I grew up was in Rialto. Wonderful little hood, about, let me see, like an hour away from Los Angeles.
Oh, we love Rialto.
Yes, Rialto, San Bernardino, the IE.
All of it.
So, and that was, again, that demographic was actually mostly Latino and African American. So, and I love that. I love that I came from such a diverse background in that sense. But I also felt super out of place because I had my friends who spoke Spanish fluently and I didn't. And so I would just be like called the white girl. So it was like really, it really sucked because I was like, but wait, I'm not. I'm one of you too. I want to play with you. And then when they start talking in Spanish, I would be like, I would kind of catch on a couple words here and there, but then I wouldn't really know. So I always felt like a little bit of an outsider, or like my Mexican card got taken away. And then they would, same thing like you, they would judge me, but it was like worse because I couldn't even understand what they were saying as they were judging me. Or I would go to their family member's house, and the family member, like the dad or the mom or somebody, would be like condemning me because my parents didn't teach me Spanish. And then why would you ask a little girl, why don't you speak Spanish? I don't know, dude, go ask my parents. Like,
it's not my job.
Yeah, I'm just here to play. So it came a really big insecurity. And even now, like, people ask, like, well, why don't you just learn Spanish yourself? Because when I do go to learn, it's not Spanish that I can like have a conversation with other people.
Yeah.
So it's like proper Spanish, and then I find out that not that many people know proper Spanish.
No, girl, no one. Everyone gets taught proper Spanish. I'd love when you're in a conversation with someone and they're like, "Oh, I learned Spanish in high school. I did 5 years," or like, "I did Spanish in college," and then you're talking to them and you're like, "I have no idea what you're saying to me," because that is like literally collegiate book.
Yeah,
Spanish.
Right. Or go to Spain and they'll understand you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Spain, and for whatever reason, I guess they don't really. I know this is like overgeneralizing, but I remember when I took a trip to Spain when I was in college, and they were like warning me because like, oh my gosh, Spanish, they don't like Mexicans, and so just be careful when you're speaking Spanish. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I had a great time. I didn't have any problems, but
yeah, we went like 5 years ago, maybe. No, not even that long ago. A couple years ago, we went with my family. We took the kids, and then they told us the same thing, but I didn't really feel like anybody was hating at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I went to France, they were more upset that I was American.
Oh my gosh! And trying to speak French, it is so hard. I cannot. I tried.
I didn't even try. I didn't even try. I was like, wee wee.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I know. So I feel like just navigating this world with like these mixes of culture of being like Latina, but not Latina enough, but then also like growing up in America and having kind of like the American culture. For at least for me, like I know my family was very much mixed. It was like when I say what we grew up as, I always say like, oh, I'm Mexican American, because I had kind of both of those cultures. Like I grew up here. It's all I've ever known. But culturally, through the food, through our rituals, even through like a little bit of religion, I'm not religious at all, actually. But all of that stuff was like very heavily influenced by what my grandparents were taught, how they were raised, what my mom and dad were taught, and how they were raised. And like, so I feel like now I have this kind of like mesh, but it's not like a full serving of either one. It's just like, just throw it on the plate and that's what you get.
Right. I always felt that I can relate to not my same generation, maybe like my children's generation, because they're going to start to feel like how I felt growing up. Like, I mean, not, how can I say, not like that. More of like, they're going to know like that their grandparents, great-grandparents spoke Spanish and crossed the border and whatever, right? But they might not know Spanish, and it's going to be a little more normalized.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that does kind of make me sad because I do love the fact that when I do see a Latina who's so much into her culture and like knows Spanish and like knows all the meals and like all and their family's so like cultural, I'm just like, oh, I want that. Like I have to go study that. I have to go buy Mexican food cookbooks.
Yes. Watch the master classes.
Masterclass. Yeah. I have to go follow Chef Marcella in San Diego. Hey, Chef Marcella.
We'd love to hang
Shout out. I've took your Zoom classes. I've taken her Zoom cooking classes, and I've really dove deep into the Latin culture, like understanding pre-colonialism and like what was that like? Because even though we're saying, I'm saying like, I want to speak Spanish, but that wasn't even our indigenous language, you know? And so it's like, we still don't even know exactly about that. Like we're still mimicking a culture that's not ours, which is from Spain. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to see like, and I think when I went to Spain, that was such an eye opener of like, wait a minute. Oh, this is the colonization that happened. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was really eerie when I did go to Spain, because I remember seeing, it was in Madrid, one of the buildings, there was like this big bronzed horse. And on top of the horse was like this, I don't know, it was like a general or something. Mm. And the horse was like charging, and it was a really pretty statue. It was huge on top of this rooftop. And I just looked at it as if my bones started to shake, and I felt like I've seen this before. It was like my ancestral DNA was like, you just saw a glimpse of like what happened when your ancestors got colonized.
Wow.
And it was just like, and I just got like really freaked out, and I was like, whoa, this is like intense. And then I would see statues of Christopher Columbus, and I'd be like,
oh, do you love him?
Yeah, I don't like Chris. Columbus, you know? So I felt that when I went there, I felt this sense of like, part of it was like, wow, like I can see my features there. I can see like my culture too. Like my facial features were more adapted to Spanish features, and they are indigenous features of Latin America.
Yeah.
And my mom, I found out she's like 70% Spanish because we took her 23andMe. I'm like, you're a white lady.
I mean, at this point, I feel like most of us are.
Right. But most of my Spanish or most of my European is from Spain, right? So I'm like 50% Spanish, basically.
Wow.
So when I went there, of course, my genetic expression is going to look more like a Spaniard.
Yeah.
So, but I also was like, oh, this is kind of like interesting. But then I'm like, but wait a minute. This part of my ancestry colonized the other half of my ancestry and suppressed. And so I was like, ooh, there's a lot of healing that needs to go on here too.
Yes.
Healing this like this Spanish blood lineage that we have. And that's what got me into looking into understanding pre-colonial Latin America. And I say Latin America because my grandma's from Nicaragua, so I want to, address her too. Yes. So just understanding that dynamic of like how we carry that in our DNA. Mm-hmm. And when I went there, it was like my DNA was like, yeah, bitch, don't forget. Like I got
reminder.
Yeah, gentle reminder, this raging, rage that you feel at this statue. Like it's in your bones.
Wow.
So I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. So that kind of got me into like starting to look into indigenous practices.
Yeah. I feel like I have started looking more into indigenous practice through the realm of spirituality, because I was raised like a proper Catholic, and we just went to church all the time, and that was like all I ever knew. But for some reason, like there was just something about it that I don't know. And it didn't fully sit with me, and maybe it was just the church that I went to, because like we had moved early on from like a heavily predominant like Latino area, and then when we moved to the IE, we moved to Riverside, which was predominantly white, and that in itself was a whole like culture shock and a whole another experience that we'll save for another episode. But I think it was really then when I was like, oh, wow, this, like, I just wasn't a fan of how people were kind of carrying themselves. Like, they were friendly in one setting to your face, and then, like, you went to another setting and it was not the same kind of treatment. And there was just a few instances where I was like, man, do I really agree with, like, being a Catholic? Like, is this really what I want to do? Like, does it fit with me? And yeah, just growing up, afterwards I was like, yeah, I don't think I really feel called to, like, pursue this. That's probably just a deep dive that I need to do on my own personal time. But that, like, I think feeling that I didn't really fit into, like, the Catholic realm, but I still, like, believed in the higher thing. Like, I felt like there's more than us. Like, we are somehow, like, all connected, and, like, we should all be good to each other and, like, take care of each other. And although I didn't find it in my experience with Catholicism, I was like, okay, well, let me see what other kinds of things that I can explore that will kind of give me that and fill that void. And that's where I started turning, like, just simple things. Like, I started out with, like, a couple of crystals in here, and I was like, oh, these are for, like, your heart and stuff. And then I later went to, like, sage and Palo Santo, and I was like, okay, I can, like, cleanse my aura and, like, do some of these things. And yeah, lately I've been, like, doing more of plant medicine and, like, trying to remember, like, because my grandma would always have different, like, herbs and stuff in her garden. She would be like, I forget which one it was like cola de caballo. I don't know what it's called in English, but yeah, I don't know. I just remember she would always call it that, and I was like, okay, sure.
Well, caballo, that's a
horse,
like,
right?
Okay.
Horse tail.
Oh, maybe.
Plant.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, and she would always make teas with it for different, like, ailments or whatever, and then, like, they would have the marijuana leaves in the alcohol. And yeah, I remember we would get, like, huge trash
She's making
bags.
the CBD.
Yes, girl, before all of us knew that
Right?
this is what you should be doing.
Right.
And of course I had no idea what it was, and it was just this, like, the leaf, which I'm a big fan of now. But yeah, she would put that into, like, the alcohol, and we would, like, put it on our joints. If I had, like, earaches, it would go into my ear, like, all of these things. And so now that I'm older and also have my own ailments, I'm like, okay, what can I do to, like, help myself and heal myself? And that's and through food. I'm a major foodie. I love food.
Me too.
All of the things.
Me too.
So yeah, so that's kind of been my journey, like, exploring more of that stuff. Like, I made tepache the other week, and it came out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It was a little too many cloves, but I was like, oh, look, I'm being like my ancestors. I'm making tepache.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And I think that's the key, is, like, connecting back to, like there's something about when you're doing it, it starts to feel like, wait, I've did this before. Or wait, this feels a little familiar.
Yeah.
It's like getting back on a bike and just, like, you just know how to ride it. And I feel like that's what I do sometimes too, when I'm, like, mostly playing with, like, plant medicine and stuff like that.
Nice.
And cooking. So, and my grandmas both like to cook. They both have their little gardens, chili garden off to the side, and all that. And so they make their jams and, like, their guayaba drinks and all that stuff. So it's like all of that stuff. It's like I want to keep that, and I think for me, because my awakening when it comes to spirituality started when I started teaching yoga. I would say it's a long story too about my spiritual path, but I would say when it got a little more, like, curious outside of, like, Catholicism and all that, because my family was brought up Catholic too, although I was only baptized.
Oh, yeah, actually me too. I was never a confirmed Catholic.
Yeah, I'm not a confirmed Catholic. And I was baptized late. I think I was, like, 4 years old when I got baptized. I know.
Ooh, girl, you were in limbo for 4 years.
Right? I could have been in purgatory if I died. Like, but I'm the last child, you know, like, my parents were like, oh, you know, it's okay.
By then, everything's wishy-washy. They've been through it, like, 1, 2, 3 times. They're
like, she's special. She's going to be okay. And look, I'm the most spirited one out of my siblings.
Wow.
Actually, I take that back. We're all pretty spiritual. But my spirituality is more in spirit, not religion. So, and I wasn't really like, my parents weren't religious too much either, but my grandma on my dad's side was.
Yeah.
And she taught me like all the prayers and all this stuff because she knew my mom and dad wouldn't take us to church, so she would get mad. And then when I'd spend the summers with her or vacations, that's when it was like literally like Bible study time.
Oh, man.
And she would like teach me the prayers and all that stuff. But now I look back and I'm like, I appreciate all that because it's like part of her heritage, part of her, like it's, you know, most people, and I don't want to generalize because I know there's a lot of Christian Catholics and or you know, Latinos who are Christian, Catholic, Jewish, like, you know, there's a lot out there. But just from what I was raised and what I mostly saw, like most Latinos in my demographic general area were Catholic.
Yeah, same.
So I felt like once I started getting into yoga, and then from there I went straight into Ayurveda school and really studied Ayurveda, which is where yoga comes from, which is from India. And I was like, once I completed the whole programs and it was time to like, okay, now be this like holistic Ayurvedic practitioner and bring all these cultural studies and philosophies that are, you know, 3,000 to 5,000 years old and blah, blah, blah. But I was like, imposter syndrome kicked in. And I was like, wait a minute. And then it just didn't feel right because it felt like, oh, I'm using, like I really know a lot about somebody else's culture,
right,
but I don't even know about mine.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, I can't even speak Spanish.
Double whammy.
Damn, Arlene. So the spirit guides were like, mija, come here. Let's take you back in and let's try to make up for what you feel like you're lacking so that you don't feel like you're this imposter.
Yeah.
But I would say that was almost a gratitude nudge to that. Like I feel like grateful the fact that I was like, wait a minute, let me like check myself real quick. And this just doesn't feel right in my soul. So then I just was like, to feel better about it, and it just opened up Pandora's box to be like, well, what did, you know, if the yogis did this, what did like what did the indigenous people do? And then that's what got me into whole history of like everything, and I went on a whole dumpster dive.
Yeah.
And then it got me into like, okay, well, I know about Ayurvedic herbs, but what did my ancestors use? And then just understanding Ayurveda does teach a lot about, you know, working from the land that you live on.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, clearly there's no Ayurveda herbs here in San Diego or in this side of the Americas.
Yeah.
So let me start trying to like really utilize the philosophies that I learned through Ayurveda and the teachings, and now adapt them to my culture. And that feels more aligned. And I feel good about that.
I love that. I think that's great because for even people who like grew up in the culture and who like spoke the language, like culturally rich in like the foods and the traditions and all of that stuff. Like, I mean, I'm sure there are people that like even like feel, I guess, like that it's not their favorite part of them.
Right.
I mean, everyone has their own things, but I feel like all of us have to kind of like accept that everyone's on their own journey. And like, I think that's kind of the part that makes me most sad about like when I'm attempting to speak Spanish or like attempting to make foods and things. It's a lot of times it ends up being like a critique of like, oh, well, you're a pocha, or like, oh, well, don't you know you don't do it that way and you should cook this way. And like, okay.
Didn't your mom teach you?
Yeah. Right. Like, no.
Right.
I'm learning now though. And yeah, I feel like maybe it's just growing older too. And I think just like wanting this sense of self, this sense of clarity of like, okay, who am I as this like entire being? And like, yes, for me, like I am Mexican, Latina, like what does that look like in San Diego and living in California my entire life? Like it definitely looks like I'm a California girl who happens to be Mexican. Like, and I think now like diving deeper into it, like I just want more of that like Mexican side of me because I had it in pieces growing up, but because it wasn't really like full-fledged thrown into it, I feel like now like I'm kind of missed out on a little bit of it, and I just want to experience what it is like. And like I mean I love Spanish language. I like it's so beautiful, and so that's one of the things that I'm like really trying to to get good at, because like I want to be able to speak it fluently and I don't want to be embarrassed when I'm talking to people. But like it is very hard, especially learning that when you're like, I don't know, at my age, I feel like learning that with like everything else and also being exposed to other languages, like I still trip up. Sometimes I'm like, oh wait, that's not Spanish, that's Spanglish, or I think that's an Italian word actually. Like,
Italian word. Ciao.
Like there's just so many things. And so yeah, I feel like now, like it's just like, yeah, like how we started saying, like reclaiming what our culture and our heritage is to us.
Yeah. And I think that the more we talk about it as Latina women, the more that we can start to be aware of other people's journeys and other people's stories and their culture and their heritage, and that we are coming to these now, you know, third to fourth generations of Latinos or Latinas here in the United States, and it is going to change, you know, and we are such a young country. We're only like, what, 400, 500 years old?
Yeah.
So the generations are going to start to move away from the first, you know, lineage that was, you know, the first immigrant, migrant, whatever it is that came here, right? So I just feel like the more we talk about it in conversation and we share our stories and our journeys, the more that when we see somebody who's speaking Spanglish, that we can, you know, the fluent Spanish speaker could be like, oh, you know, good for you for trying, or like giving them a little more like praise, or like, you know, or maybe when there's like a meal that's like just not the perfect meal to be presented, that's super traditional, right? It's like you can just give a little like support, like, hey, at least they're trying.
Yeah.
We're not trying to just make hot dogs and, you know, French fries all day. Like I make tamales and I don't even know, like it's a little bit of my nana's recipe from my mom's side, but and my grandma on my dad's side, she makes them from like Nicaragua. They're like a mix of Mexican and Nicaraguan.
Oh my gosh. Even, yeah.
They're like random and weird and different.
There's
They're
like
still good though.
Hundreds of variations of tamales, even just within like Mexico. Every region kind of has their own little twist.
But you know, it's like, oh, when you give a tamale to another Mexican,
oh girl,
you're just opening up a whole can of worms.
I hope it goes well.
Because you're just like, here. And then you're like, am I accepted? Did I get initiated into, you know, the cooking tamales world? Like there's a whole like judge and jury when it comes to people eating other people's tamales.
Yeah. Which is so funny because when you think about it, like all that goes into food and like we pour our hearts and our souls to it, I feel like, especially for me, like as a Latina, like that's kind of the thing. Like you show love through your food and your cooking. And like when you're giving that to someone, it's like you're giving a piece of yourself. And for that to be critiqued so hard, it's like, ouch, you're critiquing me.
Right.
And I'm trying to be giving you a gift and be nice. Like what's going on here?
Yeah. And I'm like, but I'm proud of my tamales. I'm the only one in my family, and I have a big Mexican family on both sides. And I know there's maybe a handful of my cousins who also make them, but you're talking about like 5 out of 50.
Yeah.
You know, that are like going to try to attempt it. And for me, it was important to bring the tradition of making tamales because I wanted my kids to still have something that was like traditional. And we always ate them on Christmas. I did growing up. Yeah. So that's what we do. And now my kids, like, they love it. They look forward to it. Like we have a whole like, you know, me and my husband get our wine glasses out from our wedding and we drink champagne and we only bring them out that day. And then we put a tablecloth and then on the table, and then we line the kids up. And then they now know the whole, like, you get graduated to, like, be a certain stage of, like, you're a spreader, or you're the, like, the one who puts the meat on, or you're the ones who put the topping on, or you're the one who's stirring the masa. So they get all that. And, like, I look at that and I'm like, oh, like, that's cute because they're doing what I did growing up. But it's different because I was in a room with my grandmas and all of their kids and all my aunts. And now it's just, like, me and my kids, and it's a smaller group, but
that's so nice.
It's just something that is important, and I feel like, you know, so when I hand you all my tamales,
don't judge them, please.
Don't judge them, but they're not bad. They're not bad. I learned a lot from YouTube.
I love that you like carry that tradition. And like, I think, for me, like, that's definitely something that reclaiming the culture, like through these little traditions and things that you have. Cause I don't know, it's like, it brings us together. It's community. You tell stories, you exchange. Like, it's also how, I don't know, I always find out so much about my family when I'm cooking with them.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the key that opens the door to like literally everything. So yeah, I like that you do that.
Yeah. None of my family's really cooks. My aunts, my mom's not. And I have a lot. There's 8 on one side and 7 on the other as far as aunts. And then my mom doesn't really care to cook. So I feel like that, like what you're saying, attaches me to my culture. And I don't know what nest I fell out of.
The cooking nest.
The cooking nest. But when I do cook, I do feel, because both my grandmas passed away. And they passed away during COVID. But I can feel them coming, like they're there with me when I'm like cooking, or especially when I'm making tamales or pozole. Like, I can feel like they're like up there, like, yes, thank you. Like, somebody's carrying it on, you know?
Yeah.
And then the grandpas are behind them, like, yes, give that to your man.
Because they're never in the kitchen.
No, not at all.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I know, especially tamales and pozole. I feel like, and menudo too, like, those are, I don't know, such big staples, especially for holiday cooking. I feel like that's so common. Birria, I think, would be like another one.
Mm-hmm. Quinceañera time.
Yes,
Weddings.
or even wedding time, girl.
Yeah,
I'm
weddings.
like, I'm about to have a birria at my wedding because it's cheap.
Girl, I had a taco truck at my wedding, and I have no shame. I would recommend anybody do that, because literally everybody was like, that's like the best food I had.
Dude, I know. What is it about weddings? And the food's just not good.
No. And why? Like, why spend all that much when you can just get a cute little taco lady with her family or whatever and, you know, support a small business and give them, you know, revenue to help support their family versus these big ass catering companies where nobody even likes the food.
Yeah, it's not even that good. Yeah. I take that back. The only good food I've had at weddings were at a Chinese wedding and at an Armenian wedding. Phenomenal. Mm-hmm.
Damn, Armenian wedding sounds good.
Yeah.
I would want to go just to eat.
That's why I went. No, I'm just kidding.
Does anybody need a +1? Let me know. For Armenian, though, please.
You'll be invited to my wedding. It's going to be Mexican Armenian.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We're going to do the whole thing. It's going to be fantastic. I think that's what I'm most excited about. Looking forward to my wedding is the food.
Oh, I love it. Yay.
And also marrying Chris, which is great. So.
Yeah, I guess that matters.
Yeah, I forgot. Love you.
Oh my gosh.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess what are our key takeaways here from today?
I would say to embody your Latina and however you choose to embody it. I think being more accepting that our culture is going to shift and change just a little bit, and also holding on to the things that make us Latina, like the food, clearly the language, the artwork, like the hairstyles. You know, my daughter taught me about a copy paste Latina.
Oh,
have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah, so like teenagers now are like trying to mimic the 90s cholas.
Girl, stop. I got made fun of, and maybe it was because I was growing up in Riverside, but I got made fun of so hard. Like, I used to have the hoop earrings and like the slick back hair and the ponytails, all of that. And then like, I remember later I tried wearing the hoop earrings and they literally called me a chola. And back then, that's not a good thing to do.
No. That was my grandma's biggest critique. You better not be cholas or cholos. Don't grow up and be a cholo. So yeah, I get it.
It had a different connotation than it does now in 2024.
It wasn't cute.
It wasn't cute. It usually meant you were like in some shit that you weren't supposed to be, and you were probably dealing with the popos. Like, yeah, it was not a thing to do. But yeah, I can't believe that's coming back.
Yeah. So, there's those things that, little throwbacks that we might see our kids trying to like come up and do and stuff. And I thought that was amazing. I was like, copy paste Latina. Wow. Look at that. I learned a new term. I'm cool. Through my 14-year-old daughter.
Love it. Gen Z. They're coming for all of us.
Oh no, she's Gen Y. No, it is Gen Z. I take that back.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, no.
Yeah. No, she's Gen Z. My youngest daughter is Gen Alpha. which is after Gen Z.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I know. We'll see what she's going to come up with.
In future episodes.
Yeah.
Gen Alpha, Gen Z, millennials, and boomers. No, no. What are you?
I'm a
X.
millennial.
Oh, you're a millennial?
No, girl, don't tell me I'm an X.
I'm sorry.
I mean, nothing wrong with being an X, okay? I mean, we love you too.
The elder millennial.
Yeah, I'm an elder millennial. I'm still happening. We started it all.
Yes.
The whole like I don't want to work type deal, and let's make things fun. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I mean, I want to work. I mean, hi, I have Latino blood in me, Mexican blood. But I think that takeaway is just stay true to yourself, true to your culture, and whatever that looks like for you. If you can talk to grandparents and things like that, I think like getting stories, writing them down. Like I think that's one thing I always wished that I could have had more conversations with my grandparents because there was a language barrier. They spoke a little bit of English, like enough to like tell me what to do and like have a couple conversations. But like the moment I would start to ask questions where they would just like want to start telling me a story, they'd start talking to me in Spanish. And then I was like, you just lost me. So I think, and then bringing things, if you have kids, like, what can you do that can continue to establish the culture that you want to bring and the traditions that you want to carry on generations beyond. So like I already knew what that was for me and my family.
Yeah.
And then I mean that's what I could come up for right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if you're not the one exploring like your cultural identity and you're happy with it, great. And be accepting of other people's, let them go on their journey. If they ask for help them, maybe share a couple things with them, but just take people as they are. Yeah,
like don't be stingy with your tamale recipes.
No, girl. I want to know the best way to make it, the most juiciest way. Like I want bomb fire tamales every year.
Yes. And I'm sure as we go forward on more podcasts, we'll have more of these conversations. Let us know if you liked the talk that we had today. But I'm sure we can go on a lot more dumpster dives. Valley and I have a lot of history of, going to college as a Latina.
Ooh, yes.
Being a Latina entrepreneur, raising families, dating, like all the stuff. So
all the things
we're
which we'll be covering.
Yeah, we plan to bring you more. So hopefully you enjoyed our chit chat today.
Yes, I know I did.
Yeah, me too. I don't know about y'all, but we did.
We had a great time.
Right.
All right. See you for the next one.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Espiritu Coffee Chat.
We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found a little inspiration to take with you.
If you loved what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform.
And stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more.
Until next time, keep the spirit alive and the coffee brewing. Cheers!
Cheers.
Ow, ow, ow.